Good morning, friends. This is the fourth Sunday of Easter, and we're continuing through the festival of Easter for 40 days until Pentecost, and then the Ascension. That's the conclusion of this part of the church year, and then we start to get into the next part of this second part of the church year, where we have Trinity Sundays, but that will come in the fullness of time, as we say. So we recall now Easter. What is going on in Easter? Jesus continues to appear to his disciples, and these passages recall that. So let's think about this and think how we can get real value from these ideas into our life. There's no point really thinking about Christianity, thinking about becoming a Christian, thinking about living the life of a Christian, unless it adds real value to your life. You might as well go and wash your car or something or other. So there is real value here in understanding these ideas. And what do we have to do about it? Well, we have to work a little bit. What does that mean? It doesn't mean go and wash your car. It means think about where you are in life and think about how you can apply it. Everybody does it differently. Everybody thinks about that process differently, and everybody can come to a satisfactory conclusion from their own side, in their own time. Everybody. So the collect has got the most remarkable set of expectations, almost instructions, of what happens during this process that Jesus has gone through and what we are expected, or we can choose to go through as well. So the collect says, O Lord Christ, as thou didst at this season rise from death into the wondrous power of an endless life. Now, in our world, in our daily life, in the world where we clean our teeth and put our shoes on, things come to an end all the time. Things come to an end all the time. Our loved ones die, our pets die, things get lost, all that stuff. And so this is talking about, in this single line, a different sort of life, or, using the words that we can use these days, a different level of consciousness. It's not everyday life, this consciousness that is being talked about. And so we're rising from death, and death is part of this world, part of losing things, part of getting old, part of unhappiness, unkindness, part of horrible terror, part of inhumanity. That's this world. Now, we can still stay in this world and experience these things, because we're going to come to that very soon. So may we, by thy most gracious help, rise from the darkness of sin, that is separation, rise from the point of view we are separated from the Christ within us, into the ineffable splendor. So there's a lot of light and glory and those sorts of things. You can see this depicted on television whenever the story of Jesus or God is depicted. There's always light around them, and that's what our eyes see. And now here is the word with the most significance for us: the ineffable splendor of conscious life in thee. Now, our waking consciousness is what happens when we open our eyes in the morning. And as the Irish say, if you don't wake up dead, you should get on with your life. So, just a funny joke. But to be consciously aware of Christ, you have moved forward in your understanding and in your deep connection with the Christ within. So maybe we can't perceive Christ with our conscious mind, our waking mind at the moment. But what this collect says is, That's the process that we engage in. And under those circumstances, we can still be living on earth, but consciously aware of the Christ all the time. And that is the path of becoming a Christian. That's the path. People might say to you, well, what is it about being Christian? Do you have to be miserable all the time? No. You don't have to be miserable all the time. You don't have to be miserable any of the time. The only thing you have to do is gradually aspire to become conscious of the Christ within every day, all the time, connected. And then the collect concludes with this reference to light, light of light. Always light is associated with the Christ, and darkness is associated with the separation, sin with separation, whatever it is. So the epistle then, which Matto read this morning, is St. Paul talking to the Colossians. And a little bit of history when he's writing to these. There was a lot of discussion at this time. This is not long after Jesus has died, gone away, disappeared, to our conscious sight, still visible to people with special sight, maybe even to us in the future. But at this time, there was a lot of discussion of so-called Gnostic thought. And so we don't have to think about that at the moment, but there was a lot of debate. What does it mean to be a Christian? And St. Paul was very clear what it meant to be a Christian. He had this powerful revelation where he went from Saul, the person who was gathering up Christians and what we might call dobbing them in, and they were treated with very harshly after that, to this what we might call, using modern terms, catharsis, this change, incredible change. He lost his sight for a period of time, and during that time he had visions, and he was transformed from his own previous consciousness to consciousness of seeing the Christ. And then nothing could shake him. Nothing could persuade him of anything else. This was a very, very profound thing. So he's writing to these people, traveling around the Mediterranean, writing to them saying, I have seen what the story is. I didn't see Jesus when he was alive, but I witnessed him in my waking consciousness. And it's very powerful. And so he writes in the words of the time, as ye have therefore received Jesus Christ, so walk ye in him. Those of you who have experienced this, walk with him. He's with you all the time. Stay with him. Invoke him. Ask his advice. Ask for guidance. Ask for blessing. It's all there, 24/7. Never stops. And he says, you've been taught by Christ in your own way. We all learn in different ways when we're connected to the Christ internally. We all get different instructions and different things to do. It's all in alignment with God's will. But when we're in the groove for us, we know it. And so he goes on to talk about faith and the operation of God. He uses that strange expression, the operation of God. We might say it's God's will in action. So God's power in action is called love. And it shows up in evolution. So evolution is God's love, God's power, and that's the operation of God. It's not God suddenly turning into be a ear, nose and throat surgeon doing operations on people, although he can do that as well. But when it's acting in this way, when it's in alignment in this way, then we know about it. He's been raised from the dead. St. Paul tells everybody that he's been raised. And everybody wants to know what that means. And so he has to explain what that means. At the end of his explanation, he says, set your affection on things above. Don't expect good things from the earth. You don't have to walk around being miserable. It's not all evil. He's not saying that. He's not saying the earth is evil. That's what some of the Gnostics said, and that's what he's fighting against. He's saying, just don't expect the world to deliver sustainable, deep satisfaction. The only source that can deliver that is the Christ within. But live in the world, just don't have any expectations that it's going to deliver those sorts of things to you. And now the Gospel from St. Luke is a continuation of the passages that we've been reading. And this is all happening on the first day of the week, Sunday. Sunday is the first day of the week. This is all happening. Disciples going to the tomb, women going to the tomb, one of the women seeing Jesus. Great change of consciousness for that person to see that. And then that person going back to the disciples. Some of the disciples believe it, some of them don't. Bit of confusion. But always fear and doubt amongst the disciples. Fear and doubt. They are not sure whether the people of Jerusalem will turn on them again. So they're very nervous. They're very worried. And the gospel passage starts, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said unto them, peace be unto you. Now, this is after the two men who went to the village 60 furlongs away and came running back again and said, he was with us. And they tell the disciples, all right, they're pretty excited and they seem to have had a genuine expression, but the disciples are worried and concerned and they're not really listening properly. But Jesus now stands in their presence and says these wonderful words of connection. Peace be with you. Open your hearts. Connect with me. And he said, these are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you. Now, he then relates all the words that they heard before. But now they've been all shaken up and they are absolutely amazed. And now he's got their undivided attention. And now he'll spell it out again. And now it'll sink much deeper into their hearts and give them courage. So he opened their understanding. And he told them how all the things that happened were foretold in the gospel, not in the Gospels, in the law and the prophets, in the so-called Old Testament. The New Testament hadn't been written yet. In the Old Testament, in the Bible, in the Jewish Bible. And slowly, their hearts opened and they became full of what he calls the Holy Spirit. Pentecost is yet to come. But they then went into the temple and were no longer cowering in their rooms, but praising God. And they didn't come to any harm. And the Gospel of Luke concludes pretty soon after this and says, Jesus taught many more things after this time. But these things were written, this is St. Luke writing, these things were written and recorded so that all who read it can have faith. And we have to build on faith. Faith is an active thing that we have to nurture. It doesn't necessarily happen without anyone putting a bit of work into it. So where are we? We're in the Easter festival. Lots of things going on. Wonderful things going on. But most importantly, the deep, genuine, absolutely clear-cut message of Jesus comes through. There is life after death, forgiveness, the expansion of consciousness. We're all connected. And to understand all this, soften your hearts. The message of Jesus. So as we go through these Sundays at Easter, I commend that you listen to this. Think about it just a little bit. Think about it a lot. And remember what it means to be a Christian. The opening of the heart and the connection of the Christ within.